Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission is always to take foundational source material, really get into it, analyze it thoroughly, and pull out those profound insights and, well, the actionable knowledge you need to be truly well-informed. Today, we are undertaking a critical deep dive into one of the most, I'd say, structurally essential chapters of the Quran, Surah Az-Zumar, the groups, chapter 39.
Yeah, and this deep dive has massive implications, really for spiritual and psychological integrity. We're looking at a Makki Surah here.
Right, Makki Surah, revealed in Mecca.
Exactly. Revealed when the early Muslim community was facing, intense, really sustained persecution, threats, opposition on a theological level, too. The environment was just incredibly volatile.
Okay.
So the messages here, they aren't focused on, legal details. It's all about reinforcing the absolute bedrock of faith, making it unshakable against worldly trials.
That context is just so important, isn't it? It frames everything.
It really does.
So our specific mission today, then, is to extract these profound metaphysical declarations, these ethical statements that are aimed right at solidifying that faith and defining what are the non-negotiables for, well, eternal accountability. This surah feels almost like a blueprint for spiritual survival when things get hostile.
That's a great way to put it, a blueprint. And the central theme, the thread running through all 75 verses, is pure monotheism, what we call Tawhid.
Okay.
And the practical output of that belief system, absolute sincerity, Ikhlas. In every single act of devotion, every deed, the surah basically argues you can't have one without the other. They're intrinsically linked.
And the title itself, the groups, Az-Zumar, that seems to give the listener the whole framework for judgment right from the get-go. It really establishes the stakes, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, it does. The title comes directly from those vivid, almost cinematic scenes in verses 71 and 73.
Right, the ending.
Yeah, the climax. It paints this really clear picture of humanity split into two distinct crowds, two groups, on the day of judgment. And this imagery, it just establishes that all our life choices, ultimately, they sort you into one of two eternal categories.
Wow.
So the immediate implication for you, the listener, is pretty stark.
Yeah.
Your affiliation, your group, it's determined by your actions and your sincerity right here in this life.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's jump right into that foundation. The surah kicks off by just establishing its authority, no room for doubt. Verse 1 asserts, the revelation of this book is from Allah, the Almighty, the All-Wise.
Yeah, and that statement it's the ultimate grounding, isn't it? It just shuts down any notion which was common then among opponents, and you still hear echoes today that this revelation is, made up or just the inspired words of a man.
Right.
By saying it's from the Almighty Al-Aziz, it's asserting irresistible power, total authority. And then the all-wise Al-Hakim that asserts that every command that follows is based on perfect, unassailable wisdom, not just some arbitrary whim.
Makes sense.
It sets the stage completely.
And immediately following that declaration of absolute authority comes the core mandate of the whole surah, Ikhlas. Sincerity. We see this so clearly in verse 2, and it really feels non-negotiable. The command to worship Allah by doing religious deeds sincerely for Him only. Sincerity is basically defined right there as the prerequisite for any deed to even be accepted.
It's the filter. That's the perfect word for it. It's the filter for absolutely everything. Without Ikhlas, and that means, doing something purely for Allah's sake, seeking only His pleasure, His reward. Well, the deed is spiritually empty. It's invalid.
Even if it looks big on the outside.
Doesn't matter how big it looks. A deed done for human praise, for fame, for some kind of worldly gain, it's rejected, period. It's like a spiritual audit of your intention, constantly running.
And this absolute clarity about intention, it's immediately followed by a really categorical rejection of intermediaries in verse 3. The surah confronts that mindset head on, doesn't it? Those who used idols or maybe perceived holy figures. And they rationalized it by saying, oh, we're only doing this so they bring us nearer to Allah.
Yes, and Allah just categorically condemns that specific justification. And this is such a profound theological point. The path to closeness, to qurb, with the divine, it's direct, it's unmediated.
No go-betweens.
None. Seeking nearness through any partner, any figure, any object. Well, that's shirk. Associating partners with Allah.
Yeah.
And that's a theological falsehood that just completely disqualifies you from true guidance. It really comes down to an issue of jurisdiction, you could say. Whose authority are you under?
So if the source says adinu al-khalis, this pure, unadulterated devotion belongs only to Allah, what does that mean for us, for you listening, trying to navigate the complexities of modern life? What's the real practical takeaway?
Well, it means actively rejecting subservience.
Yeah.
refusing to bow down to any authority outside of Allah when it conflicts with his command. Now, in the Makki context, that was pretty clear-cut.
Yeah.
Reject tribal idols, reject political pressure from Quraysh. But today, Adinu al-Khalis demands liberation from maybe subtler forms of idolatry. It goes way beyond just wooden statues.
Like what?
Well, think about it. The idols of our own desires.
Huh.
The absolute authority some people give to economic systems, or maybe the intense pressure of human rule, the tyranny of seeking validation on social media,
Oh.
or even just deeply ingrained cultural practices if they contradict the divine command. You have to be willing to question those allegiances.
So it's really about cognitive freedom, the freedom that comes when you know deep down you only truly report to one authority.
Exactly.
Because a person chasing likes online, or someone prioritizing wealth accumulation above absolutely everything else, or maybe someone who fears what people think more than they fear divine accountability. You could argue they've divided their devotion, right? They're losing their Ikhlas.
Precisely. Their loyalty is scattered, it's dispersed, and that inevitably leads to anxiety, to chaos. Something the Surah touches on later with a powerful parable. Pure devotion, Adinu al-Khalis, demands that the believer commits their entire worldview, social, political, private, everything, to that single master. And that singular focus, that's the source of inner clarity. It's the source of ultimate freedom.
Wow. And to really drive home this idea of singular devotion, the surah then immediately shifts gears, doesn't it? It goes into these cosmic proofs of Tawhid. We see this in verse 5, presenting these just overwhelming logical arguments. He created the heavens and the earth in truth. He wraps the night over the day and wraps the day over the night. And it goes on talking about the intricate creation of humankind from a single soul, the provision of livestock.
Yeah, and these aren't just like pretty descriptions of nature. They're existential arguments. Seriously, the sequence of creation, these massive cosmic cycles, the perfect, unbelievable alternation of day and night, the intimate, almost miraculous creation of human life itself. It's all designed to overwhelm the rational mind.
To make you stop and think.
Exactly. And to generate taqwa. Now, taqwa isn't just fear in the scary sense. It's more like an awe-inspired consciousness of Allah, a state of awareness that demands action.
Okay, let's talk about that cognitive dissonance for a second. If someone intellectually gets it, they acknowledge that the same being who wraps the night over the day also created them from a single soul, which is just staggering, incomprehensible power.
Right.
How can they then fail to grant him singular devotion? Where's the disconnect?
Well, that's the so what, isn't it? The so what is the logical inevitability of Tawhid.
Yeah.
Only the one who effortlessly maintains this vast, intricate, continuously running universe, the one who controls the very flow of time, who sustains every single living thing moment by moment only, he is logically and metaphysically worthy of complete singular devotion.
It just makes sense.
It's the only thing that makes sense. To look at the cosmos, acknowledge that power, and then what one? Divide your loyalty. Give some of it to something that's finite, temporary, utterly dependent on him for its very existence. That's the ultimate intellectual failure. So these cosmic proofs, they serve as an immediate self-check for you, the listener, a check against divided loyalties.
Okay, so moving on from establishing that foundation, the surah seems to build on it by providing tools for resilience, a clear spiritual model for daily strength. You mentioned earlier the report from Aisha, may Allah be pleased with her, that the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, used to recite Surah Al-Isra and this Surah Az-Zumar every single night.
Yes, and that consistent practice, that dual focus, it establishes a really vital model for daily spiritual readiness. Think about it. Surah Al-Isra deals heavily with morality, purifying your character, social ethics basically, our practical actions and how we interact with creation.
Right, the how-to.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Surah Az-Zumar, as we're seeing, reinforces the foundational creed of Tawhid, sincerity, accountability, our core belief system.
So it's like a unified spiritual defense strategy. One chapter guards against internal corruption, sins of the heart, the tongue, and the other strengthens you against external theological errors and worldly anxiety.
Exactly. You absolutely need both to survive what you could call spiritual warfare. They act like parallel streams, feeding into your resilience.
That makes a lot of sense.
And within that whole defense structure, knowledge itself is fundamentally prioritized.
Yeah.
We'll talk about verse 9. That one clearly elevates the status of the believer who possesses knowledge.
Ah, yes. Verse 9 asks that really powerful rhetorical question. Are those who know equal to those who know not? It just unequivocally establishes that the highest state of devotion, it integrates deep knowledge with dedicated action. And the source material points out that this integration is perfectly exemplified by the description right there in the verse. The believer performing night worship, alternating between standing in prayer and prostrating.
Yeah, knowledge guides the action, right? Gives a meaning precision. And then the action validates the knowledge, making sure it's not just theory floating around in your head.
Practical application.
Exactly. And that description of night worship moving from the long-standing prayer, qiyam, to the humble prostration, sujud, it shows this continuous balance. A balance between acknowledging the potential for punishment, for divine justice, and simultaneously appealing for boundless grace and mercy. Knowledge informs the depth of both the fear and the certainty of the hope.
But, okay, knowledge and action, they're always tested, aren't they? Especially by hardship. Which brings us right to the strategic value of patience, Saber. Given the persecution the early community faced, this command must have been absolutely essential.
Oh, it was life or death resilience, truly.
Mm-hmm.
And the encouragement in verse 10 is just tremendous. Only those who are patient shall receive their reward in full without reckoning.
Okay, that phrase, bikari hisab, without limit, without reckoning. We need to zoom in on that. What does it really mean to get a reward without limit? And how does that understanding redefine patience itself?
This is the core life lesson that transforms pain, suffering, difficulty into a strategic investment. When Allah promises a reward without reckoning, bikari hisab, it essentially removes the reward from a strict, transactional model.
Yeah.
I do 1 unit of effort, I get 1 unit of reward.
Right, it's not just quid pro quo.
Not at all. Instead, patience transforms a hardship, which is always finite, right? It's limited by time or health or circumstance. It transforms that limited thing into an eternal investment that yields an infinite, limitless return.
Wait, hold on. Let's just sit with that for a moment. The hardship itself is temporary. It will end one way or another. But the reward for enduring it with patience is boundless. It never ceases.
Precisely. The proportional difficulty of any finite trial, no matter how severe it feels in the moment, becomes spiritually, almost insignificant when you weigh it against an eternal gain that is literally limitless.
Wow.
This understanding is what motivates the believer to view difficulty, persecution, illness, loss, whatever it is, not just as a burden to be endured, but as an unparalleled opportunity.
An opportunity.
Yes, it's like a spiritual currency that guarantees an infinite return on investment. And knowing that fundamentally softens the emotional impact of the sacrifice. So patience gets elevated from just, gritting your teeth and bearing it mere stoicism to becoming a dynamic, hope-filled, strategic spiritual practice.
That completely reframes the struggle. It's not just a reactive burden you're carrying. It's a proactive choice you're making for maximum eternal gain.
Beautifully put. And that mindset leads naturally to the final strategic point in this section, the principle of hijra. Migration, verse 10, right after the patience part, includes that critical statement. And Allah's earth is spacious.
Okay, why is that statement about the earth being spacious so critical right there, immediately following the command for absolute patience? Why not just tell people to stay and endure indefinitely?
Because it provides the practical escape hatch, the directive for when patience is no longer spiritually safe or even possible. If you're in a hostile society that makes it impossible to practice Tawhid and Ikhlas openly, if staying means you have to compromise your core faith,
Then you have to leave.
then the believer must prioritize preserving their faith over loyalty to their homeland or comfort or possessions. The earth is spacious. They are commanded to seek a new land where they can practice freely.
So, patience is required, absolutely, but only up to the point where your actual creed is threatened. If the persecution gets so intense that you simply cannot maintain your faith integrity, then physical migration becomes the necessary spiritual strategy.
Exactly. It reinforces that your true eternal security rests only with Allah and the purity of your faith. Attachment to a specific place, a piece of land, must yield to your commitment to your creed. And this perspective makes the world seem vast, but also temporary, which helps ease the psychological burden of leaving everything familiar behind.
Okay, section 3 then seems to transition into these really powerful analogies and parables. They feel designed to, heal the heart, manage spiritual anxiety, and really focus the mind firmly on eternity. Verse 21 gives us that amazing parable of transience, the cycle of vegetation. You see the rain coming down, crops of all different colors sprouting up, looking vibrant. But then they wither, they turn yellow, and ultimately they just become dry, broken dust.
Yeah, and this specific type of reflection, tafakkur, it's described as a reminder, a dika, but specifically for those with understanding uli al-albab, people who think deeply. And it delivers this dual lesson, and the two parts are inseparable.
Okay, what's the first part?
First, it confirms the absolute certainty of resurrection. Just like the dry, seemingly dead earth is revived with rain, brought back to life, so too will humankind be brought forth from their graves, life from death.
That's clear. And the second lesson, that seems to address the just intensely temporary nature of this world, the dunya.
Yes, exactly. The vibrant success, the apparent prosperity of worldly life, that sudden burst of colorful crops that is guaranteed to eventually wither, to crumble back to dust. It always returns to dryness.
It's a cycle.
It is. And recognizing this fosters profound humility. It systematically shifts the believer's core focus away from temporary worldly gains, which will inevitably perish, towards eternal goals that last. A person of true understanding sees these cycles, growth, ruin, as being under Allah's absolute flawless control. The key is the heart must not become attached to what will certainly die.
That sets the stage perfectly then for discussing the unique impact of the Qur'an itself on the human heart. Verse 23 calls the Qur'an Asan al-Hadith, the best statement, and it highlights its structure, Mathania, this book of repeating themes, especially promise and warning.
Yes, and that structure is absolutely intentional. It's masterful, because this design is meant to elicit a very specific, required spiritual reaction in the sincere heart. When the verses detailing warnings, punishment, accountability are recited, the sincere believer feels a tremor. The skin literally shudders.
A physical reaction.
A tangible physiological response. It's linked to khasya, that awe-inspired reverence mixed with fear. This involuntary reaction immediately pushes the person away from sin, from heedlessness.
Okay, and then the balance. What happens when the verses of mercy, promise, forgiveness are heard?
Then the skin and the heart soften. This leads to Raja's hope. And that hope motivates the active pursuit of good deeds, of turning back to Allah. This dynamic process, the trembling and the softening, it's the necessary spiritual calibration. It's what keeps the heart alive, receptive, responsive.
So if the heart is hard?
If the heart is hard, it neither trembles at the warning nor softens at the promise of mercy. It's spiritually inert.
So this dual dynamic, this back and forth, it prevents spiritual extremism, doesn't it? Too much fear could lead to paralyzing despair, Qunut, which the surah warns against later. That's dangerous.
Extremely dangerous.
But too much hope without the balance of fear could lead to complacency, right?
Right.
To delaying action, thinking, oh, I have plenty of time, which is also dangerous.
Exactly right. The heart, the spiritual core, must remain in this perpetual state of khawf wa raja, fear and hope. It's this delicate balance that ensures the soundness of the self, keeps you on the straight path. And the profound insight here, I think, is that actively engaging with the divine word, with the Qur'an, is essential for maintaining this balance. You can't just rely on external observation or human intellect alone. That's insufficient. It risks allowing the heart to harden, making it impervious to this life-giving message.
Wow. Okay, and to really crystallize this whole theme of singular focus, avoiding that spiritual chaos, the surah gives us one of its most memorable parables. Verse 29, the parable of conflicting loyalty. A slave owned by several quarrelsome, demanding masters, always fighting with each other, versus a slave owned by only one master.
It's just a devastatingly clear analysis, isn't it, of the psychological outcome of shirk, of divided loyalty. Imagine being that slave with multiple masters. Each one is pulling you in a different direction, demanding incompatible things. It breeds internal chaos, constant anxiety, misery.
Yeah, you can feel the stress just thinking about it.
And it perfectly mirrors the life of someone who submits to various competing authorities in their life. Chasing validation from peers, submitting to unchecked desires, blindly following shifting cultural norms, and trying to claim belief in God at the same time.
That scattered devotion, that divided loyalty, it leads directly to the loss of sukun al-qalb, doesn't it? That inner peace, that tranquility. The person is just perpetually exhausted, trying to please every master.
Whereas singular devotion, Tawhid, brings profound mental and emotional security. Clarity. The slave with only one master. They have a clear direction, a defined purpose, a guaranteed outcome if they're obedient. So the return to Tawhid is fundamentally the return to deep mental and emotional stability. It frees the mind from the endless, exhausting competition of worldly masters.
Powerful analogy. And then wrapping up this whole section, the surah brings us right back to the ultimate reality, the universal boundary. Verses 30 and 31. Verily you, O Prophet, will die, and indeed they, your opponents, will die too. Then, on the day of resurrection, you will be disputing before your Lord.
Yeah, this is such a crucial reset button. For the heart, for the mind, Every single worldly argument, every political rivalry, every theological dispute, every clash of desires, it's all finite. It will end.
Everyone faces the same endpoint.
Exactly. Since all beings face the same inevitable boundary, death, the true focus must shift entirely to the eternal reckoning. That's where all the differences will be finally, justly resolved by the Almighty, the All-Wise. If you lose focus on that boundary, that inevitability of death and judgment, well, you lose perspective on absolutely everything else.
All right, the next thematic section seems to outline the mechanisms for protection, the spiritual defenses you build up when you really embrace sincerity. Let's look at verse 35, talking about the reward for the pious, this mechanism of moral optimization. Allah will expiate their minor faults and give them reward according to the best of what they used to do.
Yeah, this is just an incredible insight into divine generosity, isn't it? And it's a highly practical incentive for believers. It teaches this principle of, as you called it, moral optimization. Allah's perfect justice is always tempered by his boundless grace.
So it's not just about justice.
No, not only are minor faults wiped away, expiated, but the final reward calculation, it's based on the standard of their best deeds. Not just the average, not the minimum. The peak performance sets the bar.
So the goal isn't just clocking in, doing the minimum quantity of good deeds. It's really about aiming for quality, for excellence, for consistency. Knowing that those moments of peak performance, those best efforts, will actually set the standard for your entire reward structure.
That's exactly it. It encourages striving for eyes-on excellence, beauty, perfection in all your duties, whether they're spiritual rituals or worldly responsibilities. You aim high, knowing that the quality of your most dedicated efforts is what determines the final magnitude of the reward. This shifts the believer's focus, you see, away from just defensive anxiety about making mistakes toward proactively maximizing high-quality spiritual investment. You strive for the best because you know your best is what counts the most in the end.
Okay, but striving for that kind of excellence, especially in a hostile environment like the Makki period, believers inevitably face huge challenges, threats. Which brings us perfectly to the foundation of absolute reliance, tawakkul. That incredibly powerful rhetorical question in verse 36.
Yes.
Is not Allah sufficient for his servant? Alaysa lahu bikafin abdahu.
That question. It's not just a question, it's an active spiritual shield. And it's a direct rebuke to fear. The historical context, again, is so important. This verse came down when believers were facing intense threats from the idolaters, who were invoking their own false gods, their tribal power, their human strength against the Muslims.
So the question cuts right through that.
It cuts right through it. It assures them the ultimate power, the ultimate protection, the ultimate sufficiency, it belongs only to your singular master, Allah.
Let's dig a bit deeper into tawakkul, reliance. It often gets mistranslated or misunderstood as just passive trust, like whatever happens, happens. But what's the active spiritual component here? How is true reliance implied in this verse?
That's a great point. True tawakkul is absolutely not fatalism. It's not passivity. It's active reliance after you have taken every sensible, permissible means available to you.
Okay, so you do your part first.
You tie your camel, as the saying goes, and then you place your trust. It means achieving a state of complete inner peace, freedom from anxiety, because you know deep down that your ultimate outcome is managed and guaranteed by the Almighty, the All-Wise.
So when a believer trusts completely in Allah's sufficiency,
They are freed. Freed from the crippling fears, the anxieties, the worries that plague people who rely solely on worldly means, their bank accounts, their political allies, their social standing, human validation.
it's a profound psychological security, isn't it? It's like saying, my reliance is placed on the ultimate reality, the ultimate power, regardless of what human opposition I face, regardless of economic downturns or personal losses or anything else.
That inner tranquility. It truly is a gift, and that reliance, that tawakkul, is constantly reinforced by this idea of divine control and constant awareness, muraqabah, which is beautifully illustrated in verse 42.
Ah, the verse about souls and sleep.
Exactly. Allah takes the souls at the point of death, and for those who don't die, he takes their souls during sleep. Sleep is defined here as a kind of lesser death.
That is such a profound, continuous lesson in our own vulnerability, isn't it? If even sleep is a lesser death, and our very existence is this constant moment-to-moment act of divine sustenance.
Then life is truly, utterly held only by him. We don't own our next breath. We are, in essence, borrowing it moment by moment. And recognizing this confirms that reliance on him, Tawakkul, isn't just some emotional comfort blanket. It is the most logical, the most rational, the most necessary response to the actual reality of our existence.
Such a realism.
It is. And this certainty of continuous divine control, it provides immense contentment, deep tranquility. It affirms that Allah's plan for the sincere servant, the one who relies on him, is always ultimately for the best, no matter how difficult things might appear on the surface.
Okay, now we arrive at what feels like the emotional and spiritual peak of the surah. This section provides what many scholars describe as one of the most reassuring, most hope-filled verses in the entire Qur'an, especially for those who feel weighed down by sin. We absolutely have to dedicate proper time to verse 53, this foundational message of hope.
Yes, this is. It's the ultimate tender invitation back home. It's structured perfectly to strip away any pretext, any reason for despair. Let's break down that intimate address Allah uses here.
It's striking, isn't it? Allah commands the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, to say on his behalf, O my servants, ya ibadu, who have exceeded the limits against their own souls.
Just pause on that. My servants.
The address is just startlingly intimate. That use of the first-person singular pronoun, my servants, and addressing them directly, even though they've exceeded the limits, transgressed against themselves, it conveys this immense divine love and tenderness. It grants them the dignity of still being called his servants, even in their state of sin.
It's like Allah is saying, I still claim you. You still belong to me. I still love you. It's incredibly powerful. And the command that follows that address is just as powerful. Do not lose hope. La taqnatu, in Allah's mercy.
La taqnatu, don't despair.
Exactly. Despair, kunik, is presented here not just as a passing sad feeling. It's portrayed as a profound spiritual disease. It's almost an act of disbelief, really disbelief of the sheer vastness and the absolute nature of Allah's attributes of forgiveness, Ghafur and mercy, Ram Rahim. To despair is to doubt Allah's capacity or willingness to forgive.
And the promise that follows is just, absolute, comprehensive, unequivocal. Allah certainly forgives all sins, Jamian.
All of them. This covers everything.
Yeah.
Minor sins, major sins, historical transgressions committed back in times of ignorance. Everything is potentially covered as long as the repentance is sincere.
This sincerity is key.
It's the condition. But the assurance of forgiveness itself is absolute. And we know this promise isn't just standalone. It's firmly rooted in that core theological principle articulated in the authentic Hadith Qudsi, where Allah wrote in his book, kept with him above the throne. Verily, my mercy prevails over my wrath.
Mercy prevails over wrath.
Yes. This confirms that mercy is the overriding, dominant, divine attribute in Allah's dealings with his creation. And this understanding provides such deep psychological solace. It gives everyone a reason to always keep turning back to him, no matter how huge their transgressions might seem in their own eyes.
That is truly boundless mercy, but there's always a but, isn't there? This mercy is conditional. It requires immediate action. The very next verse, 54, issues a warning. It lays out the condition of urgency. Turn back to your Lord and submit to him before the torment overtakes you.
Yes, this is the crucial qualifier. Repentance, tawbah. It's not some kind of cosmic get-out-of-jail-free card that allows you to just keep sinning indefinitely, thinking you can repent later. No, it must be sincere. And that sincerity must lead to complete submission, which is inaba, turning back fully.
So it's a change of direction.
A complete change. Tawbah acts like a spiritual polish. If it's sincere, the heart can actually be left in a condition even purer, even stronger than it was before the transgression. Why? Because the act of sincere humility, of recognizing your fault and turning back, is profoundly purifying in itself. And this is the warning. This incredible grace, this open door, must be acted upon immediately, without delay, because the window of opportunity, our lifespan, is finite. You don't know when it closes.
And that urgency is driven home so powerfully by the vivid depiction of future remorse, isn't it? Verses 56 through 58 paint this picture of the soul in the hereafter, just lamenting its own negligence. Alas, my regret over what I neglected in regard to Allah. If only I had guidance. If only I had another chance.
Oh, that depiction of overwhelming existential regret. It's meant to jolt us awake now. It's meant to compel present alertness, present action. It warns against the greatest spiritual mistake, procrastination. Delaying repentance, delaying submission, until the moment of opportunity expires, until death arrives or the day itself. The soul will regret having ridiculed the divine warnings, having delayed taking action, having squandered the precious opportunity of life. The message is crystal clear. The time to act decisively, to turn back, to submit, is now. Well, the breath is still in your body.
And now we turn towards the climax of the surah. This majestic display of divine sovereignty and the inevitable sorting of humanity into those two distinct groups. Let's begin with verse 67. This verse demands ultimate humility to Wadhu by presenting the true appraisal of Allah.
Yes, the description here is absolutely designed to be overwhelming, to completely demolish human arrogance. They have not appraised Allah with true appraisal.
They didn't grasp his true greatness.
Not even close. While the earth entirely will be within his grip on the day of resurrection, and the heavens will be folded in his right hand.
The imagery is it's staggering. The entire cosmos, the whole planet Earth, all the physical realities we perceive as so vast and permanent, all held within his grip, the heavens folded like a mere scroll in his hand.
It really puts things in perspective, doesn't it? And this description, it serves a dual purpose. One theological, one spiritual, related to humility. First, regarding the divine attributes, mentioned the grip, the hand, the established consensus of the early scholars, the Salaf, dictates that we affirm these attributes exactly as they are mentioned.
Okay.
We don't ask kayfiyya, we don't ask how. And we absolutely do not make anthropomorphic comparisons, comparing Allah to his creation. Allah is exalted far, far above any limitations of created beings. So we affirm the attribute exists, as he revealed it, without defining its modality or comparing it to anything we know.
So the theological instruction is clarity and affirmation, but absolutely no vain speculation about the how and the spiritual lesson. The takeaway from recognizing this absolute, overwhelming control.
Profound, inescapable humility. When you recognize that the entire cosmos is utterly insignificant, like a scroll being effortlessly folded in Allah's control, it just exposes arrogance and pride as fundamentally baseless. It's ludicrous.
Yeah.
And arrogance, remember, is the defining characteristic of the disbelievers. So this overwhelming display of divine power and control directly prefaces the judgment scenes. It ensures that you, the listener, understand that the reckoning which follows is the flawless application of absolute, undeniable justice carried out by a perfectly sovereign being. There's no escape, no argument.
Which sets the stage perfectly for the groups themselves. First, the groups driven to hell, verse 71. The disbelievers are sikha-driven forcefully, implying indignity, harshness, and their gates are opened only after they arrive. And then the keepers question them, basically confirming their own self-condemnation. Didn't messengers come to you?
Exactly. That harsh driving, the sikika, it's characteristic of the fate reserved for the proud, the mutakabirin. Those who refused humility, refused submission in this life, and the delayed opening of the gates. That just reinforces the rejection, the lack of welcome. They arrived disgraced, and the questioning confirms it was their own choices, the rejection of clear guidance that led them there.
Now, contrast that immediately and so sharply with the groups led to paradise in verse 73. The pious are also described using the word sikha, but the scholars explain the linguistic context here implies something totally different. An honored, dignified conveyance, like a royal procession being led forward. And crucially, their gates are already open and welcome.
It's such a beautiful, stark distinction, isn't it? The prepared open gates signal honor, welcome, acceptance, and most importantly, the keepers greet them with Salamun alaikum, peace be upon you, and that powerful affirmation,
Ibtum.
Ibtum. What exactly does that convey? It means something like, you have done well, or you were good, or even you have become purified. It signifies their state of purity and righteousness, achieved through their faith and deeds. And this linguistic contrast, the forceful driving versus the honored leading, the closed gates versus the open gates, the rebuke versus the salam and ibtum, it reinforces the central theme of the entire surah.
Sincerity and accountability.
And the results, humility, taqwa, purification. These are the necessary spiritual preconditions for achieving dignity and honor in the hereafter. Arrogance and rejection lead to forceful severity and disgrace. Purification through faith and sincerity leads to honor and a warm welcome.
And the final joy for the believers is just complete, isn't it? Note their realization, their praise in verse 74, as they inherit the land of paradise, settling wherever we please. It emphasizes the sheer magnitude and the permanence of the reward.
Total freedom, total satisfaction. And the surah concludes, verse 75, with that majestic, awe-inspiring scene of universal praise. The angels are surrounding the throne, glorifying their Lord. It's the ultimate scene of cosmic order restored, of perfect closure. It confirms the perfection and the absolute conclusion of the divine system. Justice has been served perfectly and completely, and all praise, ultimately and eternally, belongs only to Allah, the Lord of all existence.
Oh, This deep dive into Surah Az-Zumar,
Right.
it really has been a comprehensive manual, hasn't it? Outlining the psychological necessities, the spiritual strategies for excellence and survival. Let's try to synthesize the key principles for you, the listener.
Okay, well, the absolute foundation is Ikhlas, sincerity. That brings clarity, it brings profound inner peace by removing the anxiety that comes from conflicting loyalties.
Right.
Then this has to be dynamically coupled with sadr, patience, and tawakkul, reliance on Allah. Together, these form a powerful spiritual shield. They transform limited worldly hardship into limitless eternal gain.
And the ultimate life privilege, maybe the most hopeful point, is Tawbah, repentance. The message is clear. Never, ever succumb to despair, Kunit. Allah's mercy is vast. But this boundless mercy must be acted upon immediately and sincerely. We have to turn back before we face that profound existential regret of those who delayed action until it was simply too late.
And finally, that overwhelming cosmic display we discussed, the folding of the heavens and earth. It demands tawadu, humility as the absolute prerequisite for dignity. Arrogance leads to ignominy, humiliation. Humility is the ticket to eternal honor. That's demonstrated so clearly by the stark contrast between how the two final groups are received.
Okay, so your actionable principle for the listener today, drawing from the surah's structure and message.
I think it's the necessity of cultivating what you might call the living heart. You must engage with the Qur'an, called here Asan al-Hadith, the best statement, in a way that genuinely fosters and actively maintains that dynamic balance of fear and hope, khawf wa raja.
The trembling and the softening.
Exactly. That's what keeps this spiritual core responsive, alive. It prevents stagnation, spiritual hardness, and it ensures you are constantly optimizing your deeds, always seeking that ihsan, that excellence.
Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting, connecting back to the title, the groups. This is our final provocative thought for you to consider. The source material mentions that the description of the believers entering paradise in groups is actually seen as an encouragement for righteous companionship in this life. It emphasizes that sincere friends, people united by faith and righteousness, will actually be gathered together in Jannah, in paradise, this whole concept of eternal group affiliation.
Which raises a really important question you should sit with, reflect on. Your eternal group, it's being formed right now, based on your sincerity, your choices, and the companionship you actively choose.
So how does knowing that your group affiliation literally extends beyond this world and that you will be gathered with those you love, follow, and associate with, how does that affect the choices you make today about who you surround yourself with, whose loyalty you prioritize, who influences you? It really makes companionship an eternal high-stakes choice, doesn't it?